All right, all right. So, got Rob on the phone, but I don't yet have him live in the broadcast. So, I thought I'd share with you some thoughts about the Robin Williams death. And I had just posted an article there on freemantv.com about the sad news of Robin Williams passing. And there has been this major infighting going on in the truther conspiracy world where half the people want to say this is Illuminati murder. It's obvious. He was a celebrity sacrifice. And the other half, being the InfoWars crowd and Mark Dice, and saying you're all a bunch of kooks and fanatics and just get off of this. It was suicide. Well, I may have found another answer, which is just as baffling, though. You will find the article there on freemantv.com. And what I show you is that there was a film with Robin Williams, filmed in 2009, written by Bobcat Goldthwait, entitled The World's Greatest Dad. And this film from 2009 prophesied this death exactly. And I think it might give us a clue as to what may have happened, whereas this turns into simply a horrible accident. You see, in the film World's Greatest Dad, Robin Williams plays a character as an author, and his son is just a horrible person and ends up killing himself through autoerotic asphyxiation. Now, I have an image there on the article where you can see from the film this scene where the son is sitting in a chair with a belt around his neck and he's leaning forward masturbating. He eventually dies doing this. And this is the exact position that Robin Williams was found in, sitting in a chair with a belt around his neck, tied and wedged between the door and the door jamb. And it's possible it was not suicide nor Illuminati murder, but a sad case of autoerotic asphyxiation death, much like David Carradine. And I know people want to read into a lot of these things and want to get belligerent about it, but we really, have to stay level-headed and start to look at the evidence. And I have the coroner's report right there on the article for you to see so that you can understand that this is how Robin Williams died, that he was sitting in a chair with a belt around his neck. But the crazy thing about it is that World's Greatest Dad depicts this exactly. I mean, exactly as it was shown, as it was described in the coroner's report. And then a film in which up-and-coming posthumous film by Robin Williams called The World's Angriest Man. The line from him is saying, "Before you see this, I will be dead." That's another quote from Robin Williams in that film. So there's a lot of weird coincidences. There's an absolute coincidence with the Family Guy and them showing Peter Griffin having the Midas touch, but everything he touches turns into Robin Williams, and then wants to commit suicide. Peter Griffin does. And then this aired on the BBC, and just moments after its airing, the report came out that he had died. So that's the Family Guy has some pretty crazy coincidences, the Boston bombing and this one, and I'm sure there was another that I can't think of at this moment. But yeah, to jump to the conclusion that this is Illuminati murder is jumping the gun, and really it looks more like it was a horrible accident as opposed to a setup situation. So look for yourself. The article's there on freemantv.com. Just check it out and have a look at the imagery. It just is mind-boggling. We happened to watch that film last night, and we're like, oh my God, this is insane. What is going on? I can't believe that they would actually... Yeah, it was written by Bobcat Goldthwait. Another film you should check out by Bobcat Goldthwait is God Bless America. Now, the thing is that most of our jesters are the saddest and most depressed people. So you know, we really got to give our hearts out to them. And I really want to start release the stars and hopefully get some of these celebrities to come forward, and also for the military. And I'll be working hand in hand with Kathy O'Brien to form a deprogramming method that we can then apply to all of the military and hopefully the celebrities we can reach as well. So we'll see how that goes. So let me check where Rob Skiba is. We'll go to the phones. Could this get any crazier? Oh my gosh, they just cut me out of the video. Rob, I think we're getting ready to put some messages out into the world that maybe the Illuminati don't want us to do. So let me get back to Rob Skiba, our guest tonight, I hope, for the next hour and a half, is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and best-selling author of several books, including Babylon Rising and Archon Invasion. As an ancient Nephilim theorist, Rob brings a unique and often unheard perspective to the UFO alien discussion, which we will get to some tonight. As such, he has become an internationally recognized speaker on these subjects, and often appearing on paranormal and prophecy talk shows, as well as a featured keynote speaker at many conferences around the world. Surprisingly, Rob and I had not known of each other's works, and I'm just sitting there going, is my audio actually coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. We were not aware of one another, and yet you and I have been hitting upon the same facts, the same hard topics that I don't see anyone else in this field covering. So welcome to the show, Rob Skiba.
Hey, Freeman, thanks for having me. Can you hear and see me now?
Absolutely.
All right, cool, yay. Technology's great when it works, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, for quite a while, actually, I'd been aware of your work. My wife has watched a lot of your videos, and I've seen a few of them myself. And so a while back, I ended up friending you on Facebook. And then I want to say it was about 6 or 8 months ago or so, I saw that you had posted my Mythology and the Coming Great Deception video on your Facebook page and left a very complimentary comment with it. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I mean, because I'm researching your stuff, you know, and I'm like, wow, he's got my stuff up on his wall. So, you know, then we start talking to each other, and now here we are. But yeah, it's true. For a long time, we've been sort of paralleling each other without really knowing anything about the other person.
I was blown away. There's no doubt about it. I was sitting there just like, oh my God, who is this guy? You know, and what I think is amazing and wonderful is that I've come at this through a secular perspective, and you've come at this through a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
So now many generations have felt that they were at the end times, but never before. I better box myself here. Never before has it really seemed like this is an absolute possibility, that we are in some sort of end time scenario. So let's start with the ideas of, well, you know what I wanted to ask you first, Rob? I wanted to ask you about the film Noah. Have you seen this?
Oh, boy, yeah. I think it was a colossal waste of $150 million and Academy Award-winning talent. I mean, how do you take a story that literally every culture on the planet is aware of in some shape or form, and there are flood stories all over the planet. How do you take such a well-known story and totally butcher it? Well, I didn't think that was possible until I watched that movie. Wow, did they get a lot wrong in that film.
It was incredible. I mean, they got everything wrong. You got to wonder what message they were trying to put in. Now, they had these massive rock Nephilim that were supposedly the good guys that came down to help humanity, but then were cursed by God and turned into these rock beings. How did they expect this to stimulate the idea of this interracial connection between the Nephilim and the humans.
Yeah, well, in the film, they were actually depicted as the Watchers, and I'm like, okay, and I don't know where he got the stone thing from. Other than a comic book, apparently that Noah movie, I guess, was based on a graphic novel series or something. But I've noticed a trend in Hollywood where they are consistently depicting the Watchers and or their offspring, the Nephilim, as the good guys. There was an ABC miniseries called Fallen, and the whole premise of the film is there's Nephilim kid, and it's up to him to redeem the fallen angels. I'm like, that doesn't exist anywhere in any biblical or what I call biblically endorsed extra biblical text. So, I mean, I come from sort of the viewpoint that I believe that a lot of these guys are channeling their stories, and it's just the fallen ones trying to tell their story and what they would like to see happen. But I mean, they sort of tried that before with Enoch. In the book of Enoch, you see that Enoch is essentially hired to be like their attorney. You know, they're like, oh boy, we know we screwed up, and God's really ticked off at us, and Enoch, please plead our case for us. And essentially Enoch does that. You know, God's sort of, it's almost like God says, okay, I'll play along with you. Sure, Enoch, you can play their attorney. This is what you'll tell them. No, you will not find forgiveness. Your life is going to be miserable, and I'm going to bind you in everlasting chains and put you in Tartarus. And the judgment is so severe that in Enoch chapter 68, Michael, the mighty archangel himself, I mean, next to God and Yeshua, Jesus, he's the toughest one. I mean, he takes out Lucifer, you know. And it's like, here's the mighty archangel Michael himself looking at what is the judgment of the Watchers, and he's going, man, no one's ever going to do that again. You know, he says, I am gripped. Michael the archangel says, I am gripped with terror due to the severity of the judgment of the Watchers. So here we have this Noah film, and in the film, they're redeemed by supposedly building the ark. I mean, where did they get precedence for that? Which was just utterly ridiculous, even watching the movie. I mean, if we go ahead and buy into what he's showing us, these are huge giants made out of stone, and they're walking around on the deck of the ark like it's no big deal. I mean, it's like, no, the wood would have collapsed under their feet, you know.
Right.
And then, you know, just as the flood is starting, you see them kind of kick back and throw up their mouth open, you know, and you see that they've finally been redeemed and they go up to heaven, and then Noah becomes an axe murderer. And they're like, where did they get this stuff, you know?
Yeah. It was the most ridiculous thing I had seen, and I guess if it was a comic book, then all right, I can live with that, I guess. I don't know. But so we definitely see a conditioning going on, an idea that this ancient alien hypothesis that is really rising to the surface. It's my personal conclusion that we still live under a fascist state. We still live under Nazi programming, if you will, and that they are rewriting history to conform with their needs, to conform with what they're hoping will come forward, and to utilize our belief systems to destroy the world, really. So let's start a little bit with this idea, because the ancient astronaut hypothesis is a very strong one, and there are a lot of very unusual artifacts from our ancient past that are inexplicable. So would you like to get into some of those artifacts and some of the ideas that have led you to not believe in an ancient astronaut hypothesis and to take more of the strict biblical view?
Well, actually, I think we are actually believing in much of the same thing. We're just using different terminology. I was recently invited to speak at a secular UFO conference. It was the 54th annual UFO conference in New Jersey, and Nick Redfern was there, Robert Schoch was there, and several people that have been on Ancient Aliens were also sharing the stage with me, or I was sharing the stage with them, I should say. And it's interesting because, in a way, the angels are aliens, because the book of Peter, 2 Peter, and the book of Jude talk about angels that left their prior estate, their prior way of being, their prior environment, and they came here. Well, that by nature makes them aliens. So, in many ways, we are saying the same thing. We're just using different terminology. Now, where I would differ is, I think the ancient alien hypothesis would try to put them as characters that showed up from Aldebaran or Arcturus or Orion or the Pleiades or someplace out in the cosmos. That's where I would differ. I would say, no, they came from an extra-dimensional realm, not so much an extraterrestrial realm. But what was interesting is a lot of these other ancient aliens guys are coming to the same conclusion.
Right.
I mean, they're saying, yeah, this stuff really seems to fit more of the demonic realm than it does creatures from another planet. I mean, if they're from other planets, why would they flee at the name of Jesus, for instance? I mean, why would their motifs be very similar to demonic activity that we see in the scriptures? So, in a way, I think we are saying a lot of the same things. In fact, there was an Ancient Aliens episode called Alien Breeders, and it was, I think, a season 6 episode. And I'm watching this episode and I'm listening to what they're saying, and if you just throw out the word alien and replace it with angel, like the text say, I'm like, they're telling the same story. I mean, my book, Archon Invasion, The Rise, Fall, and Return of the Nephilim, they're saying this. They're just attributing it to people from other planets, and so. Yeah, I kind of launched off with that since I was in their territory. I'm like, you know what? In the Ancient Aliens TV series, they often reference the Bible. Of course, they usually take it and kind of, in my view, twist it to say something it doesn't say. But I'm like, okay, if you guys can use the Bible to try to justify what you're saying, would you mind if I do the same thing?
Right.
And in the Ancient Aliens TV series, one of the things I love about it is they ask a lot of questions. Could it be true? What if? They put forth a worldview, but they do it in many ways in a question form. So again, I tried to pick up on that and say, okay, you guys are already using the Hebrew Bible. I'm going to use the Hebrew Bible, but I'm going to ask the question, what if it were true? And just proceed from that premise. And what I found was that they were very receptive, as was I. I was very receptive to what they had to say. They were very receptive to what I have to say. And, in the Bible, the Apostle Paul says that basically we're all looking through a glass dimly, which means we can't really see the full picture. And I think there's value in bringing people with differing points of view together to talk about it because, Freeman, you're looking through a glass dimly just like I am, but you may be picking up certain details through your angle of the glass that I can't see. I may be picking up angles and details that you're not seeing, and Robert Schock or Nick Redfern or somebody else may be seeing something different. I'm like, well, great. Let's all get together and talk about it because maybe we all have pieces of the puzzle, and if we can put the pieces together and they fit right, then we'll get a bigger picture. So that's sort of how I view the whole thing. But from my worldview, from a biblical worldview, I got into it because a friend of mine who went to Bible college came out of Bible school and watched season 1 of Ancient Aliens. And after he watched the whole season, he was, I don't want to say shaken in his faith, that's a little too hardcore, but he was shook up. And he called me and says, Rob, I know you're into this stuff. I know you study this stuff. He says, what do we do with this evidence? I mean, we can't deny it. I mean, the Nazca lines are real. All these carvings of looks like ancient aliens are real. Pumapunku, all these megalithic sites and stuff. What do we do with the evidence? And we can disagree with their conclusions, but what do we do with the evidence?
Right.
And I thought, well, this is a problem because biblically speaking, as a Christian, I'm supposed to have a ready defense for what I believe. And everywhere you turn, you have ancient aliens, and you have it in the movies, you have it on the Discovery Channel and History Channel. They're all putting forth this panspermia worldview, Prometheus, all this stuff. And I'm going, well, in marketing they say find a need and fill it, and you'll be successful. And I'm looking like churches are not talking about this stuff. Your typical evangelical doesn't even want to go there. And I'm thinking, well, this is a huge problem. It's a huge need. I might as well try to jump in and see if I can fill it.
I did want to talk to you about that because I wondered how you were received in this situation, because we've tried to go forward and talk to churches about this scenario and about Freemasonry and the evils of Walt Disney, and we absolutely are not received in this situation whatsoever. They're like, well, what are you talking about? Disney's fantastic, and how dare you possibly start to suggest these type of things. So how were you received in this scenario?
I was on a Christian radio show once, and the guy introduced me as, this is Rob Skiba. He's on the fringe of fringe Christianity.
Right.
I'm like, wow, I must be way out there. If I'm on the fringe of fringe Christianity, woo. But it's an interesting question, Freeman, because in standard evangelical circles, we're not well received. It was somewhere around 200 AD that a guy named Julius Africanus came up with what I would say, completely bogus view of what's called the Sethite theory, that where Genesis 6 talks about the sons of God coming down and mating with the daughters of men, that the Sethite view says, well, the sons of God are the good sons of Seth, and the daughters of men are the bad daughters of Cain. And I'm like, well, first of all, it doesn't say that. Second of all, later in the book of Job, we see the sons of God as a phrase. The Ben Ha Elohim is are the angels. And third, I'm like, if the sons of God are the good sons of Seth, and the daughters of men are the bad daughters of Cain, why is it that the good guys are doing the bad thing in the story? They're raping the women and doing bad stuff. And then finally, how do kissing cousins produce giants, the Nephilim? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. But unfortunately, around 200 AD, he put forth this view. Later, people like Calvin picked it up, and now, unfortunately, it's the dominant view taught in seminaries. We live here in Dallas, and Dallas Theological Seminary puts out a lot of pastors, trains people to become pastors of churches, and they're taught the Sethite view. So because that's the primary view of mainstream evangelical churches, we're not well received. In fact, anybody who gets on this subject matter that is a Christian is usually booted out as a heretic. But there is a growing group of people who are realizing, you know what, let's just go with what it actually says and believe it. Because when the Israelites go into the land of Canaan in Numbers chapter 13, they talk about this group of people called the Anakim. The Anakim were sons of Anak, son of Arba, who was an Amorite, son of Canaan, son of Ham. And these guys were huge. They're massively huge. And it tells you that. The text tells you that they felt like grasshoppers by comparison.
Right.
So where the standard evangelical community may be rejecting us, they don't really have a leg to stand on. Whereas I could take the Bible and show them numerous verses that says, hey, this is real, this is something you have to deal with, and the sons of Seth do not answer that question. Angels mating with women do, and the ancient record, and you could go through multiple cultures, is unanimous in this view that at some point ancient aliens came down and messed around with the human genome. And in one part of that Ancient Aliens episode, Alien Breeders, David Wilcox is talking about this guy, I forget, Dr. Hawk, I think his name is, or something like that. And he says that, let me see if I got that here. John Hawks, Dr. John Hawks. In the video, they say something happened 5,000 years ago, which is 3000 BC. And they identify that. They say, looking at the human genome, they've identified that something happened to our genome that modified it as much as, I think, 7%. Something changed in our genome in 3000 BC. And I'm watching this episode, I'm jumping up and going, I know.
Right.
And there's a small group of other Christians out there. Probably the most well-known of them would be Dr. Chuck Missler, who, interestingly enough, you hear Robert Downey Jr., he was on a late-night talk show saying he likes Chuck Missler. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool. Missler's got a lot of work out there. Dr. Thomas Horn, L.A. Marzulli, Doug Hamp, Steve Quayle. I mean, these are names that many of your listeners and viewers may be familiar with.
Sure.
But it's a small group. I mean, there's not a lot of researchers out there talking about this stuff. And I've been fortunate to find myself in these circles with these guys and sharing the stage with them. So, you know what? We go where people will listen, and where people don't want to listen, well, we'll shake the dust off our feet and go to the next place, Just gotta do what you got to do.
All right, exactly. So I guess in the second hour we'll get more to some of the end time prophecies and the symbolism of what we've got. Sorry, I keep forgetting to put myself on here. We'll get deeper into these scenarios of the end of the world and how how these prophecies are read and how you've come to some conclusions and dates. And so I'm excited to get to that. Um, think about the space program as we have it now. Now we have all these signs and symbols inside of there. Our space shuttles called the Columbia Endeavor for the discovery of Atlantis. We've got the SpaceX Dragon launching up to the International Space Station. And one thing that now Rob has just started a new show there on Truth Frequency Radio, and he's coming out late night there. I was on his show last Wednesday. We had a really good time, so now we get to flip the script, and I get to put Rob under the microphone. So check out Rob's new show there. Of course, you've had a show going for quite some time now. It's just now going to Truth Frequency. But one thing I didn't bring up on your show, and I wanted to ask you about now, is this kind of space-based scenario, because what I'm seeing is that there is a device, the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, which has been placed up on the International Space Station, which is capable of seeing into the anti-universe.
Mm.
And along with this, it is its corporate logo is a reptilian claw, and we find that it seems like the people in charge know more about this scenario, have a lot more understanding. This kind of gets into the Baghdad thievery out of the museums, the ideas of stargates in the Middle East, and then the idea of them having this technological know-how to breach the other dimension with technology such as CERN, or see into it with the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer. What is your thoughts on our NASA type situation that we're looking at?
You know, Freeman, I've seen you talk about some pictures that you drew when you were a young kid and had some of the various symbols and stuff that you put on the space shuttles and everything, and then years later you're like, whoa, I mean, this stuff, what was I tapping into, basically? I mean, you
Definitely.
And that's pretty fascinating, so I'd encourage, whoever's listening and watching this, if you haven't, to check out some of Freeman's work on that regarding this picture that he drew. Well, as a kid, nobody believes me when I say this, but I'll just say it anyway. When I can actually remember and describe the room that I was in and everything, watching the, I'm going to say, alleged moon landing, July 20th, 1969. I was born June 26th, 1969, so I'm barely a month old. Okay, but it burned. It burned that stuff in my head. I mean, I remember it, and I've described it in detail to my parents. And
I gotta say, Rob, I was 2. And I have the exact same experience where I'm certain I watched my family watch this on the television and their excitement. But of course, I was 2 years old, and the memory is fuzzy, but I have it, and it was such a dramatic event in their lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody at that time believed that what was depicted was really happening. I'm now. I'm 45 years old. I'm looking back at that, going, I'm not sure if we did go to the moon. If we did, we did not go the way we were shown on TV in 1969. And a big part of it, people, some people hear me say that, and they think you're totally crazy. What's your problem? I mean, you're an idiot. I'm like, okay, go look up right now the Orion project. After they retired the space shuttle program, they started the Orion project. The Orion project is a larger space capsule, similar in mission and shape as the Apollo program, but it's bigger. And I've watched a lot on the NASA website. I've watched a lot of videos where they are really very concerned with making sure that the capsule itself and the spacesuits are sufficiently insulated to handle the intense radiation of the Van Allen belt.
Right.
And numerous videos I've seen on this. And I'm going, okay, you're so concerned about making sure that the capsule and the suits are sufficiently insulated to protect against the incredible amounts of radiation in the Van Allen belt, and we supposedly went there in a tin can, basically a Coke can, in those flimsy spacesuits that they wore out there, and they just went through it multiple times with no problems at all. Sorry, I'm not buying it. And you guys are telegraphing your own lies by
Right.
showing how concerned you are with it now, when there was no effort made back in 1969 to solve that problem. Not like there is today, but look, that event marked so many of us, and people like you and I who were children at that time. It really had an impact on us because it had an impact on our family and indeed the world, who all bought into this, that we landed on the moon. Well, that was my life's ambition, man. That's all I wanted to do growing up. I was obsessed with becoming an astronaut. I drew pictures too. I've got
We
pictures of
really are
grades.
brothers from another mother. I mean,
Dude,
it's
it sounds
crazy.
like it. The more I've gotten to know you and see your work, I'm going, yep, yep, yep. But yeah, I mean, I did book reports on it, and that's whenever we had to read our own books, pick our own books. It was stuff on the space program, and I was drawing the Apollo, liftoffs and stuff like that. And I had a 150 power telescope that was pretty good for a while, and then I got a 300 power telescope. And this is when my early skepticism began, because I remember with my 300 power Jason telescope that I could see some tremendous detail on the moon. And I'm like, well, if I could see that with my little 300 power telescope in my front yard, the Springfield Planetarium, I grew up in Chicopee, Massachusetts. Springfield's the next big city next door. I figured, well, I'm going to go to the Springfield Planetarium because they have that really big telescope that's super powerful, and I'm going to ask them to show me Tranquility Base, because
Right.
I want to see the lunar lander base, and I want to see the doom buggies that we left on the moon. And every time I've asked, no matter where I've gone, nobody would ever do it.
Hmm.
And I'm going to issue a challenge right here on your program. Anybody out there who has access to a major planetarium, please go there and ask them to point to the locations we supposedly went on the moon and show you those locations. And then I want you to contact Freeman or contact me and let me know if they did it, because I want to go there for myself. I've been obsessed with that question since a very young age. I'm like, look, if you want to disprove all the conspiracies that are out there, just point a telescope up there live for everybody to see, move it around so you can tell it's not Photoshop or whatever, you know,
Right.
and show us because we supposedly left all the bases of the lunar landers, the leg part, and there's a bunch of doom buggies up there, But
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
experience, nobody will do it. Nobody will point those telescopes there. I mean, you got Hubble that can read a dime on the ground here on Earth. I mean, surely these things could take some magnificent pictures of the doom buggies, but they
We
don't.
remember they kept telling us the Hubble couldn't look at the moon, and then
It's
all of
too
a
bright or
sudden, then they
whatever.
started showing us Hubble shots from the moon.
Yeah, I'm just going to remain very skeptical about that whole thing. But getting back to kind of your earlier question about the NASA, I wanted to be an astronaut. It's why I joined the Army. I joined the Army to learn helicopters because I had read that the astronauts had to learn helicopters first because the piloting of the lunar landers was very similar, and a lot of these guys were jet pilots also. So my plan was to graduate high school, join the Army, go to flight school, fly helicopters, get that down, and then transition into the Air Force, go to the Air Force, learn jets, and then work my way into joining NASA. And most of that had to be done anyway before I was 28. So a 1 week out of high school, I was in boot camp in the Army.
Wow.
And within about a year and a half to 2 years later, I learned to be a helicopter mechanic because I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to know why it flies and how it flies before I got in and tried to fly it. Then I went to flight school, became a pilot, flew for 6 years, and every time I put my application in to go to the next level, I would get accepted. I would be top of the class and everything that I did, but government cutbacks or different things, crazy things, would happen 4 times that prevented me from going to the next level. So eventually,
Probably a good thing.
well, now I believe it's definitely a good thing, but back then I was frustrated. But I kind of just thought, okay, God, I guess that's not the plan you have for me, so I'll change my direction. Now years later, as I started doing my research for my first book, Babylon Rising, and the First Shall Be Last, especially as I did an update of it after 2012, I ended up writing about 50 more pages on NASA, and that's when I came to really understand that this is a thoroughly Luciferian occult satanic organization, and was from the beginning.
Right.
And everything seems to revolve around the ancient Egyptian gods of Isis, Osiris, Set. In fact, Jay Weidner, I got a quote up here I'm looking at. he makes an observation saying that NASA could be we know what the acronym is that everybody tells us, but he makes note of Nephthys, which is the sister of Isis,
Right.
Ausur, which is the Egyptian form of the name Osiris, Set, Osiris's brother, and Aset, one of the Egyptian forms of the name Isis. And my friend Douglas Woodward, he put out a book called Power Quest, The Ascendance of Antichrist in America, and in that book he writes, both Richard C. Hoagland and others say that NASA's decision makers are intentionally ritualistic in their planning. Woodward goes on to point out that the only gods of interest are Osiris, Isis, and Horus, who are indeed the primary characters in the Egyptian story of resurrection. And let me see, I could put some, let me get back to our Google Hangouts thing. I'll put up a screen share here if I can. Yeah, there we go. Can you see my PowerPoint there?
Not yet. There we go.
You see it?
Yes.
Okay. This is part of an updated version of my mythology one. You had the mythology one up on your Facebook page, but that was one I did several years ago. This is from the update. And I start talking about the gods of NASA. And of course, the first thing we have to discuss is the 1,600 Nazis that escaped judgment, the judgment that they deserved, and found refuge in America. And a group of 104 German rocket scientists, including Werner von Braun, Ludwig Roth, and Arthur Rudolph, are pictured here at Fort Bliss, Texas in 1946. Now, many of these guys, of course, helped to develop the V-2 rocket at Peenemünde, Germany, and came to the United States after World War II, subsequently working on various rockets, including the Explorer 1 space rocket and the Saturn V rocket at NASA. And of course, you'll notice a lot of the programs of NASA are named after the pagan gods. You have the Mercury program right here, and the Mercury 7 and all that. And all of this is very Freemason, occult, ritualistic in nature. And I talk about how Mercury is Hermes. He's the god of transitions and boundaries, moving freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine. He's the messenger of the gods. The son of Maya, who is the daughter of a Titan, Atlas. Now we have the Atlas rockets and all this stuff. I mean, these guys knew what they were doing when they named these things. And then on February 20th, 1962, the Atlas rocket carried John Glenn into orbit aboard the Friendship 7. Now this was the flight that ushered in the new era of space travel, but I think some of the symbolism is being employed here. Atlas was the father of Mercury. The Atlas rocket, which looks like a giant penis, shot up into space with one passenger, Seed, on board. Thus, Glenn, one of the 7 Mercury astronauts, was the ambassador of Earth sent up in friendship with the number 7, which is generally accepted to be the number of God. And I asked the question, was he to play the role of messenger of the gods? Of course, Glenn was a Freemason and was a member of the Mole International, the Masonic youth organization, so nothing would surprise me in that regard. Then we go to the Gemini project. That's the intermediate project between Mercury and Apollo. Of course, in mythology, Gemini were the twin brothers Castor and Pollux, and their mother was Leda, and once again, their father was Zeus. In some accounts, however, Pollux was regarded as the son of Zeus, while Castor was the son of the mortal Tyndareus, one mortal and the other immortal. It's also a common belief that one would live among the gods while the other was among the dead. And again, we see a duality dealing with pagan deities and the underworld. This, of course, also reflected the Masonic beliefs concerning Osiris and the underworld and his reincarnation as Horus in the upper world. And I just go into a lot more detail. I won't keep reading on that. But then you get to the Apollo program. And that's what really intrigues me, because Apollo, in my research, is likened unto Nimrod, who I believe is the Antichrist, the beast of Revelation. And it just so happens that Apollo 11 is the one that landed on the moon, supposedly. And the command module is the Columbia. Well, I mean, Columbia is Ishtar, Isis, Semiramis, and the wife slash half-sister slash mother of Nimrod, who is Apollo. So you have it all there, and then the eagle, Manly P. Hall tells you, yeah, but when we put a point on the back of the eagle's head, it's really a phoenix, and the phoenix in the Egyptian mythology is the Benu, and the Benu is the soul bird of Osiris, which represents resurrection, the dying and resurrecting soul bird of Osiris. So
Now,
all of the symbolism is there, man.
yeah, absolutely. We got Buzz Aldrin there performing, setting up the Tranquility Lodge on the moon, and the Supreme Council flag being up there, and then brought back and put inside of the Temple of the 33rd, and of course.
Yeah, I mean, okay, wait a minute. What's the deal with bringing Masonic regalia up on the various missions, performing rituals up there, and coming back and then presenting them to Grand Master Masons and whatnot? I mean, it's all over the place. It's crazy. And so now I look back at all that. I'm gonna put myself back up here again. I look at all that now, and I'm just plain thankful that, wow, thank you God, I did not end up going into this program, because yeah, I definitely would not have fit in. I probably would never have been accepted anyway, because I don't share the same occultic worldview as these guys do.
Right. Well, would you like to take a little break here? We're at the top of the hour. I'll see if I can get one of these videos to play, and then we'll come back after, say 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Hopefully this will work for all of you. Please let me know. It crashed on me last time, so that's what happened, and we'll see if this will actually work for me.
Starting way back, yeah, when Yahweh was busting bubbles, contemplating this disease we call man's troubles. Adam and Eve were out picking fruits and misbehaving. Knowledge of the tree of life, yeah, they both was craving. So when the reptile, they began to contract the sweetness of fruit in their mouth, they lips were smacking. But God's stewardship, both parties were lacking. Ever since then, it seems the human race has been slacking. And now they dumbfounded, stumbling around and wearing leaves, because a reptile has some tricks up his sleeve. Come on. What's it gonna take for this world to be free? What's it gonna take to break us out of this monotony? And ultimate redemption for we have to gain. We can just keep out our reptilian brain. Now looky here, lend me your ear and I'll tell another fable about these two brothers coming up, named Cain and Abel. Cain was in commerce, passing around bloody nose. Abel was discharging debts, using the blood of goats. And it came to pass, as Cain was out cutting grass, Abel getting business, busting all kinds of ass. Whatever Abel did, he seemed to get so blessed. This being the reason for all of Cain's distress. What one brother had the other seemed to lack, and this is why Abel had to get his head crashed. What's it gonna take for man to break free? What's it gonna take to break him out of his hypocrisy? So we to pay, 'cause we can't keep down this reptilian brain. Let's look upon this path with further investigation. How one species alone could cause such devastation? I'll make certain of this, it'll be the case. face how something so cold-blooded controls the human race. And fight or flight is something you'll appreciate. Our brainstem and cerebellum dominates. And after millions of years, there can be no doubts that our brains evolved from the inside out. So to the multitude, I say to you, try not to be perplexed that there's a underneath your neural cortex. What's it gonna take to break us out of this monotony? We can take. Cause we have to keep down this reptilian brain. Cause we have to keep down this reptilian brain. Cause we have to keep.
All right. Well, we have to kind of do this in another fashion. It is supposed to be playing these videos, but obviously it's not. So much for Google Plus, and we're trying to find our way through this technology. So, welcome back to the Free Zone with my wonderful guest Rob Skiba, author of Babylon Rising and also Archon Invasion, and a number of documentaries that are absolutely well worth watching. Rob's style of presentation is akin to mine, where he keeps it lively, animated, and full of data, full of information. I highly recommend you check out Rob Skiba's work. Rob, you want to give us your website?
Sure. BabylonRisingBooks.com is my primary site, BabylonRisingBooks.com. From there, you can click on the blog link, which will take you to BabylonRisingBlog.com, where I've got at least 1,000 pages worth of printed content up there that people can check out, and videos and audio and stuff like that. And also my other website is SeedTheSeries.com. That's the science fiction TV series that I'm developing. So, and most of that you can get from BabylonRisingBooks.com.
All right, fantastic. Okay, I was trying to play the Debtor's Lament from Flo White. Maybe I'll get to play that on a break here if we take another one, and let you all.
I heard some of it. I think I heard some song that you were playing.
Yeah, that was Reptilian Brain, another one of my favorites. But I was trying to play the Debtor's Lament because it's really about the idea of the creation of the Federal Reserve and the idea of, how nefarious this whole situation is. But I honestly had no idea how nefarious the Federal Reserve was until I watched your work. And I wonder if you might share the story. That is one of the most popular shows on your stream, your podcast stream. The idea of Canaanite altars being utilized in the creation of the Federal Reserve System. So take it away, Rob.
Yeah, many of your viewers and listeners may be familiar with G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. That is the title that he used to refer to the Federal Reserve, the creature from Jekyll Island. But I don't think he even knew just how accurate that statement was, that title was. I was at a conference, the Future Congress 2 conference in Dallas, Texas, a couple of years ago. And this is where all the big names in this line of research, Chuck Missler and those types of people. There's about 40 speakers there. It was a really cool conference, and after it was over, I wanted to hang out with my friend Peter Goodgame, who was very influential in helping my research along. It was a lot of his work that solidified and put some pieces together for me. So he was there from Hawaii, and I figured, hey, he was hanging out for a few days after the conference. I figured, hey, let's get together, And he said, yeah, I'd love to talk with you, and we will, but I think you really need to meet this guy that was a friend of his named Tim Bentz. And so I said, yeah, sure. Let's just all hang out, So we ended up hanging out in the lobby of the hotel. I think it was the Hyatt or whatever. It's in the DFW airport. This guy started talking, and he basically didn't stop talking for several hours, and none of us minded because we were just, our jaw was on the floor listening to this guy. I'm like, dude, I've got to get you on my radio show.
Yeah.
And so, and we've got to, do the same conversation that we're having here on my radio show. And if people go to Blog Talk Radio, I think it's somebody put it on YouTube also. It's 4 hours long. It's actually 2 shows that somebody combined on YouTube with pictures and stuff, called Canaanite Altars in the Federal Reserve. And this guy started out by telling me the story about how he was in the Middle East and came across a guy who was an archaeologist who had uncovered what they determined to be a Canaanite blood altar. Now, I'm going to stop right there and say the Canaanites, these were Nephilim. These were the post-flood remnants of the genetics that came as a result of angels mating with women in Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 4. And these are the same guys that the Israelites describe themselves as grasshoppers by comparison, and Amos 2:9 describes them as tall as cedar trees, which get to a modest cedar trees 35 feet tall. The cedars of Lebanon got to 150 feet tall. So just going on the small side, you mentioned on my show that you liked the picture that I did of Arnold Schwarzenegger at Baalbek. And what you're referring to is a picture that I created showing a 36-foot scaled-up representation of Arnold, who incidentally was known as the Oak. That was one of his nicknames. And Amos 2:9 says the Amorites got as tall as cedar trees and were as strong as the oaks. So I just scaled him up to 36 feet tall and put another 3D character that I created, same height, next to that big stone in Baalbek. And I'm like, could this be how that stone was created? Makes a whole lot more sense than anything else that I've heard.
Right.
So I say that to give a little background on who the Canaanites were biblically. So this guy comes across another guy who is an archaeologist that they had just uncovered a Canaanite altar. Well, after they had uncovered this altar, they started having people getting sick. Some people, I guess, even died, and terrorist activity increased in the region and whatnot. And Tim discerned in the spirit. He said, "You know what? That's because your ancestors didn't do what they were told." And the guy's like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, biblically speaking, they were told anytime you come across these things to tear them down and utterly destroy them, get rid of them. The fact that you're digging it up here showed that they didn't do that in this particular location, and you're bringing curses upon yourself by exposing this thing once again, And anyway, the guy kind of took what he had to say to heart, I guess, and Tim had met this, I think the guy, if I'm not messing the story up, had a young son, and Tim took a liking to this kid and gave him like a toy sword or something. And the kid was very fond of this sword, and Tim would walk by his room and see the kid swinging the sword like he's having a battle, playing around with it, and he's speaking in Hebrew, and he sounds like he's really going to town on something, And then he would stop and then start screaming, "Hallelujah! Hallelujah!" And Tim's like, "Man, this kid really likes the sword," And anyway, he felt he really got attached to this kid and wanted the kid to come along with them when they went back to the Canaanite altar site, because Tim had felt in his spirit that God was telling him to pray that thing would be destroyed. And he was assigned basically to destroy it, but he's like, this thing's like 16 feet across or something, big circular thing, and he's like, I can't just go there to destroy this. What am I going to do? So he figured, well, he'd go there and pray. So he went there and he stood on the altar and he's praying. And meanwhile, the kid, I think it was Eliyahu was the kid's name, if I remember right, was up on the observation deck because the archaeologist wouldn't let him down there in case he got hurt or broke something or whatever. So he's up on the observation deck and he starts swinging his sword again and speaking in Hebrew. And then he stops and starts screaming, "Hallelujah! Hallelujah!" And the kid reaches down and grabs a stone and throws the stone, and Tim's standing on the altar down below, and he watches the stone come flying over, and it lands right in front of him in the center of the stone, and he said, of the altar, and he said it made like a really unusually loud boom, like unusual for a little stone hitting that thing, And everybody's kind of some other freaky things happen and stuff, and they're like, okay, whatever, and they ended up leaving there. Well, I think it was the next morning they got a call saying that the whole thing had disintegrated into a bunch of little stones. Well,
Crazy.
what it turns out is that what they thought was one big stone slab, granite or whatever, I don't know what they thought it was, but one big stone slab turned out, no, it was a whole bunch of little stones that were held together by a mortar, and the mortar that held it together made it look like it was one stone. But when the kid threw that rock, and I believe the power of God was instrumental in this as well, it started a crack in the mortar that overnight had disintegrated, and the whole thing fell apart. And
Amazing.
so, yeah, and that's what he thought. He's like, this is just incredible, And I guess he let him. God led him on a journey through Europe and other places where he was finding other Canaanite altars or Nephilim altars, specifically like the one that's known to be under the castle. I forget the name of the castle, but it was like where Himmler and some of these guys, the Nazis, would meet on a regular basis, and it has a circular room where they did occult rituals and stuff.
Right.
Well, there's apparently an altar there and several other places. And God was basically teaching Tim some very powerful spiritual lessons in all of this. And when Tim was ready to come home, he felt that God was telling him, no, you have to go to Jekyll Island first. And he's like, well, I just want to go home. He's like, no, I got one more assignment for you. You got to go to Jekyll Island. He's like, okay. So he goes there, didn't have a clue what he was there for. And when he got there and made reservations at a hotel there, I guess it was there's some kind of historical museum / hotel or something there. Anyway, he got the presidential suite there, and that wasn't his choice. The woman that was manning the desk felt like she was supposed to give it to him. So he's like, okay, Anyway, he ended up meeting like the curator of the museum and struck up conversations and kind of befriended the guy. And the guy said, hey, we got some stuff that we don't show to the general public. Would you like to see it? He's like, yeah, sure. So he took him in the back and showed him some skeletal remains that they don't show the general public, and these were about 8 and 9 footers. They were giants.
Giant Native Americans.
The Timucua tribe of Native Americans. And the guy was saying, yeah, these guys, the men and women, they're all very large, very tall people. And I guess he showed Tim some other depictions, paintings or drawings or carvings or what have you, and he saw an image of these giant people holding babies by their feet, cutting their heads off and dripping the blood on an altar that looked just like the one that he had seen in the Middle East.
No, that's not something you would normally see with the Native Americans.
No, and that's what he said. He's like, I don't mean any disrespect to what you know, but can I tell you something? And the guy's like, sure. He's like, this looks more Canaanite than it looks, the traditional Native Americans, with the Comanche or the Algonquin or anybody like that, or Apache or what have you. And he said, look at the swords, the spears that these guys have. And Tim was able to convince the guy that it was very similar to Canaanite weaponry. And the activity also of doing what they were doing with the babies, And so Tim was like, is this here on Jekyll Island? And the guy's like, yeah, but I mean, it's still here, but you can't see it. He said, why not? He said, well, there's a house built on top of it. And Tim's like, well, who would be crazy enough to build a house on top of a Canaanite Timucua blood altar? He said, Rockefeller.
Yeah.
So he goes, I could take you there. He's like, okay. So he takes him to the place, to the Rockefeller estate there. And in the living room where the Federal Reserve was conceived, where the creature from Jekyll Island, as G. Edward Griffin would call it, was conceived, that room sits on top of the location where the Canaanite blood altar was, or is. It's still today, apparently. And so as he tells the story, he said, the guy let him go in there. He said, I could tell you're a spiritual person, and, you could just don't touch anything or anything, but you're welcome to go in there and pray if that's what you want to do. So the guy waited out in the lobby or whatever, and Tim went over the location in the living room where that altar was and began to pray against it. And he's like, Lord, what do I do here? I mean, I can't access it. It's under the floor, And he said while he was praying, he saw a vision of God saying, look at me and do as I do. And so he said he saw God in front of him, and he saw God stamp his feet on the ground. So at the appropriate time when he was praying, he said, okay. So he stamped his foot on the ground, and he said again, there was a loud boom, like loud that it jolted the curator in the other room. He freaked out, came in, what'd you do? What'd you do? What's going on in here? He's like, I just stomped on the floor, you know. And as Tim says this was the beginning of the financial collapse of the dollar in 2008. That took place like immediately after this event. And in his words, he says he believes that God is judging this nation, specifically the corrupt nature of our financial system, the central banking system, as a result of what he showed him there. So, you know, I've done my best not to butcher that story. So if people want to hear it in its entirety, they can go on YouTube and punch in Canaanite altars in the Federal Reserve, or go on my blog talk, revolutionary. It's blogtalkradio.com/revolutionary radio, and look in the archives there. I mean, it's 4 hours of, like, you're just glued to this story going, wow. It's a pretty incredible story.
8 foot tall Native Americans doing Canaanite rituals on an altar. That's where the Federal Reserve is created. That's something else, Rob. I'm telling you.
Right, and then to tie into what you and I were talking about on my show a couple of days ago, you got Nicholas Roerich showing up, and you know, and in fact, people could go on Wikipedia or someplace, or just Google the original $1 bill, the back of it, and it used to have the eagle on the left and the pyramid on the right. But due to this guy's influence, they flipped it, and you can actually see the handwritten notes by FDR, where he was saying, no, we got to put the pyramid on the left and the eagle on the right, which is opposite of what you think it should be, since it's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object, which is the Great Seal. The Great Seal coin has the eagle on the front and the pyramid on the back. So if you take a 3D object and make it 2D, reading left to right as we do here in America, you would think the eagle should be on the left and the pyramid on the right, and indeed it was. But Roerich shows up and, you know, deals with this with FDR and Henry Wallace, and then as a result they flip it. So, you know, there's some serious occult. I mean, I call the $1 bill a talisman, because that's what it is. It is an occult object. I mean, it's an object infused with occult ritualistic Satan imagery with an intent behind it. That's why they call it currency, because we take it and we put it out, you know, and through FDR it became the world reserve currency. So now it's all over the planet. And I mean, I hate those things, man. I don't even want to carry them. I call them Nimrods, because that's what they are. It's just not cool.
I'm certain that's the reason they have not changed the $1 bill. They've changed everything else. They've made it look like funny money. They've made it all the colors of Monopoly money, and yet the $1 bill has always remained that same talisman. Yeah.
Because
before we get, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because the plan that's illustrated on it hasn't been completely implemented yet.
Well, that is what I want to talk to you about now. Before we run out of time, I better ask about the Antichrist and the end of the world, the coming days of the apocalypse. So let's just tie that up together as best as you can with the concept of, is there an Antichrist rising at this moment? Are we in the end times? And what signs have you seen through your biblical studies that have given you some dates for us to understand what's coming?
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if the screen share will work again. I'll give it a shot and see what happens. Maybe not. Okay, well, I was going to try to, but apparently it doesn't want to work. You can still see me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me do this. Okay. As I was looking through, the Bible for descriptions of the Antichrist, we see that that the Antichrist is referred to as the beast, and in Greek the word is therion. Well, I've got a friend of mine who's sort of like my resident Greek scholar, that whenever I have a question in Greek, I'll call him. He was born and raised in Greece and speaks Greek fluently. So rather than talking to people who learn Greek as a second language in Bible school or whatever, I'll go to him, because he'll have the cultural and all of the other stuff added to the meanings and stuff. So I call him up. His name's Peter. I said, Peter, if I was to call you a therion in Greek, what would you think I was calling you? You know, what would you be hearing? He said, well, Rob, that would be like you calling me a werewolf or like a vampire or a zombie or something. I said, really? Why? He said, well, it's a word, I mean, it's translated in English as beast, but it's not like a beast of burden like a cow or a horse or, you know, an ox or something. It's something that has been corrupted. It's something that is evil. It's something that is not normal, you know.
Barack Obama. Oh, sorry.
Well,
sorry.
you know what?
Go ahead.
Well, you know, there's a lot of people that certainly believe that. I take a slightly different view on that, but I do believe he's playing a big part in all of this for sure.
Definitely.
So what I try to do as I was doing my research is I like to try to be a dot connector, because I read a lot of different books from different researchers and watch videos and everything, and I'm like, well, okay, if he's seeing this piece of the puzzle and he's seeing this piece and he's seeing this piece, do they connect? And if so, how? So I started getting into this research mainly to connect the dots for myself, but as I started writing and doing videos and stuff like that, I tried to create them in such a way that would connect the dots the same way it did for me for other people. So I found that to identify the beast, it actually works better going backwards in the Bible from Revelation 17 to Revelation 13 to Revelation 9 to Matthew 24 and Micah 5, and there's lots of places in Isaiah and stuff that you could go to as well. I could do the same thing going forward, but it's easier for me to connect the dots going backwards. So starting with Revelation 17, specifically verses 8 through 11, it says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So right there I have to stop and ask my audience, okay, according to the text, this is an open book test, where does the beast come from? Well, it says he comes from the bottomless pit. So that means he doesn't come from Kenya, he doesn't come from Hawaii, he doesn't come from the Vatican or the European Union or any place else we've always heard people say that the Antichrist comes from. It says right there he comes from the bottomless pit. So I'm like, okay, keep reading. It talks about those whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world follow him. And I'm going, okay, well, biblically speaking, if we reject Yeshua, Jesus Christ, as our Savior, then according to the Bible, your name gets blotted out of the book of life. Well, you can't blot something out unless it was there to begin with. And I believe that's why Scripture says that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. The proof is he put your name in the book. All you got to do is confirm your reservation. If you don't confirm your reservation, I'm sorry, I got to blot your name out. So who are these people then whose names were never written in the book of life from the foundation of the world? I believe these are what David Icke and others might refer to as the reptilians. These are people who were never meant to exist in the first place. These are, from my worldview, Nephilim. These are hybrid offspring that were never meant to exist. And they're the ones following this character. And so, and then again it says, when they behold the beast, the Therion, that was and is not and yet is. Now that's also an antithesis of, if he's the Antichrist, he's an antithesis of Jesus Christ, who is known as the one who was and is to come. This guy is the one who was and is not and yet shall be. And then it describes the beast. It's the Hydra. It's got 7 heads, you know. Mm-hmm. And the angel's describing this vision to John, and it says, it talks about the 7 heads being 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and then it says there are 7 kings. So it's describing the 7 heads also as kings. And the word used there is basileus in Greek, which is always the word used for the leader of a kingdom. Beasts are often representative in Scripture as symbolic of kingdoms, but in this case, which is Basileia, Basileia, this is basileus. So 7 basileus, 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he'll reign for a short space. So this is where you got to go, okay, well, who are the 7? And I credit this to the guy I mentioned earlier, Peter Goodgame, put together a list of the 7 that he believed fit biblical Antichrist characters. First one being Nimrod. Well, of course, I mean, you look at that guy, the New World Order is nothing new. This guy created a one world order. His goal was to create a tower to reach into heaven. And if you read the synchronized, biblically endorsed extra-biblical text, it tells you specifically what they were trying to do was create what we would call a Stargate, go through it, assault the angels, go into the throne room, kill God, and then set Nimrod up as the king of the universe, and that was his intention. So, and it's funny how you see similar themes playing out in the TV series Stargate,
right?
Going back to this character Nimrod. Well, then you have, so he's a good Antichrist character, first one, in fact. I would say. And then you have the Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of the Exodus, who thought himself a god, tried to wipe out God's people. He fits Antichrist character. Sennacherib is an Assyrian king, thought himself a god, tried to wipe out God's people. But the angel of the Lord came and wiped out, I think it was 180,000 of his men in one night, sent him home packing, and then his own sons killed him. Then you have the king of Tyre, who the scripture describes as a man at first, but then halfway through it starts describing him as Lucifer. So clearly this guy has some kind of connection to the devil as a good character. Then you have Antiochus Epiphanes, who, depending on your Bible, if you have early King James Bible, which had 80 books, not 66, it included the books of Maccabees, 1st and 2nd Maccabees.
Right.
The current Protestant Bible does not, and people always say there's 400 years of silence between the Old Testament and New Testament. I'm like, no, there isn't. There's only 400 years of silence because he took those books out. If you left them in there, they tell you a whole lot of stuff that happened in that time period. And this guy, again, thought himself a god, tried to wipe out God's people, went into the temple of Jerusalem and set up the abomination of desolation there, offered up pigs on the altar, and really made life very difficult for the Israelites. He's a very good candidate for the 5th of the 7 who was. The 5 who were, then there's the one who now is. I think another good candidate possibly is Alexander the Great. So I could go either way, Antiochus Epiphanes or Alexander the Great, as the ones who used to exist. And then there's the one who now is. Now that depends on when you think is, as Clinton would say. What's the definition of is?
Yeah.
Right? That depends on when you think John wrote the book of Revelation. An earlier writing would be Nero. A later writing, some say 90 A.D., would be Domitian. Now, in either case, you've got a Caesar who thought they were gods, doing really bad things. I mean, Nero had candlelit dinners to the burning Christians, and Domitian wasn't much better. So I believe that either one could be the one that now is. Then I believe the one that will come in the future, whose reign would be short, I think a real good case could be made for Adolf Hitler. And I think a lot of people who were living at that time certainly thought he was the Antichrist because he sure fit the bill.
Sure.
So assuming that we've got a good list here, then we could go to Revelation 13, and that tells you that this individual had a mortal head wound. So just process of elimination. Who had a mortal head wound? Well, Nimrod, yes, he was in multiple depictions. Osiris, he's chopped up into 14 pieces, 13 of which were found. And other characters that he is known as also met similar deaths. And Nimrod, in the biblical narrative, or in the book of Joshua, I should say, says that Esau chopped his head off. So he fits. Pharaoh of Egypt, no. Sennacherib, no. King of Tyre, no. Antiochus Epiphanes, no. Nero, sort of. Alexander the Great, no. Domitian, no. And Hitler supposedly shot himself in the head, but recent forensic evidence disputes that and rather suggests that he lived and made it to either Argentina or Brazil or Antarctica.
Right.
That's another show right there. But
Right.
But for sake of argument, let's say we've got 3 candidates. We've got Nimrod, Nero, and Hitler. Well, one of the most used phrases in the Old Testament, specifically in Micah chapter 5, which directly correlates with Nimrod, is the phrase "the Assyrian" is used for the end-time tyrant. Well, which of these guys is an Assyrian? Hitler, no. Nero, no. Nimrod, yes. So by process of elimination, just using Revelation 13 and 17, you end up at Nimrod. Well, when you realize that Nimrod also correlates to, in synchronicity, with Apollo, well, then you go to Revelation chapter 9, and you see that the bottomless pit is opened. And when the 5th trumpet blows, the bottomless pit is opened, and all these chimeric centaurs come out. And it's really interesting because when you look at Greek mythology, the centaurs were the product of an individual named Centaurus, who was a son of Apollo. And Revelation 9:11, interesting number, comes out and tells you point blank, and the king of these chimeric centaurs in Hebrew is named Abaddon, but in Greek he's Apollyon. Apollyon is a derivative spelling of Apollo. So it just told you by name who the Antichrist is. The Antichrist is Apollo/Nimrod. Now, the question is, does this individual who had a mortal head wound raise from the dead in physical form, or is he going to be cloned, or is another currently living individual, and Obama would be the best candidate, in my opinion, for this scenario, become a host for this spirit?
Right.
And quite frankly, all 3 scenarios I think are very plausible. in 2003, the body of Gilgamesh was pulled out of the desert sand of Iraq. And the reports that I heard from people like Steve Quayle and others who claim to have first-hand reports from generals and whatnot, they said that this body was in a remarkable state of preservation. Well, that makes sense because he's the first mummy, and they did it right. Osiris, the first mummy, and we talked about this on my show the other day, where you were making the connection also, same connections I made about Zahi Hawass and the tomb of Osiris that was discovered in the late 90s,
right?
Which looks like a resurrection chamber,
right?
With a 10-foot sarcophagus in it, and underneath that sarcophagus, this was their words, not mine. They referred to it as the shaft of the bottomless pit. So you're going,
right?
You're like, huh. And when you go to Matthew chapter 24, he talks about, if they say, behold, he's in the desert, don't go there. Well, Gilgamesh was pulled out of the desert sands of Iraq in 2003, coincidentally 1 month before we set up the military occupation phase, and the first thing our troops do is raid the Museum of Baghdad, take 170,000 items. They returned most of them, but of the 3,000 they didn't return, those were cuneiform tablets and things that dealt with resurrection and the afterlife. So you're like, right. What are they going to do, And then Jesus continues. He says, if they say he's in the secret chambers, well, you got the secret chamber of the tomb of Osiris, which, look, people, just go Google tomb of Osiris in Egypt and look at that thing. I mean, that is a seriously freaky place.
You can see it in my harp video, if I can just throw that in there. I have a video on harp, and you can watch Zahi announce the tomb of Osiris there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Jesus says something really bizarre. He says, "First, wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." And I'm already doing all this research on this tomb of Osiris, this body pulled out of the desert sand, and I'm thinking about the military over there. That at the time when I was doing the research, we were still in Iraq, and I'm thinking about the time when I was in the Army, when I wore especially my dress uniform, my Class A dress greens or my dress blues. Dude, you are covered with eagles from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. Eagles on your patches, eagles on your buttons, eagles on your hat, eagles everywhere. I mean, there's eagles everywhere all over you. So all of a sudden, I just kind of flashed this image in my head of a bunch of eagle wearing, and of course, that's the symbol for our country. Right. Eagle, which Manly P. Hall says, nah, it's really the resurrection bird of Osiris, the phoenix. So I'm seeing phoenix wearing eagle soldiers in my head, gathered around a body pulled out of the desert and loaded into a secret chamber. And I'm going, man, I'm thinking Jesus is looking forward prophetically in Matthew 24, and he's, in my mind, giving you the exact playbook of what's going to happen. And so that prompted me to put together a timeline that I call the Omega Plan, and I wrote about it first. In fact, if you go to BabylonRisingBlog.com and select the Omega Plan in the left-hand menu, you can read the original blog that I wrote. And then later I put together about a 22-minute video on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search the Omega Plan with a question mark, you'll see that video that illustrates, in the words of our own mainstream media, the words of our own presidents, and other people around the world, what's going on. And I never got to ask you about this when you were on my show the other day, but you talked about the most significant thing in 2012, December 21st, was your tour. And I would have to agree. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was a dud. However, what my contention is, and that's why I did an update on my book, I was thinking about this. I wrote my book and published it in February 2012, so it's several months before December 21st. And I, like many other authors and researchers out there, were speculating on what could happen on December 21st, 2012. And so we were all kind of looking forward, looking at all the signs and saying, what's going to happen, what's going to happen? We don't know. Maybe this, maybe that. Then, of course, really nothing happened that we're aware of. However, when I thought I was done with my book, I finished chapter 7 of my book. It was called Coming Out of Babylon. I thought, okay, I'm done. And basically God said to me, no, you've got to come out of Babylon too. I'm like, I'm not in Babylon, He goes, yeah, you are. And what he was showing me is how many of our Christian rituals, holidays, and activities are all directly related to Babylon. Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day. I mean, so many things all go back to pagan idolatry in Babylon.
No doubt.
And I mean, and it's one of the reasons why people put out movies like Zeitgeist, and the first third of the movie is bashing Christianity because we're just one more dying and resurrecting sun god on December 25th. I'm like, unfortunately, we as Christians have to own up for the fact that that's what we have. That's the propaganda that we've been putting forth for a number of years that has caused people to have that view. And I'm saying we've got to come out of Babylon. I had to come out first, before I could say that. And realized, you know what, I'm not going to have anything to do with Christmas and Easter because it has nothing to do with the Savior that I believe in anyway. And as I pulled away from that, I started looking for, okay, if that's the counterfeit, what's the real? And it led me to September 11th, being a very interesting date. And I believe it is the actual birthday of Jesus,
Amazing.
of Yeshua. Because Revelation chapter 12, the first few verses, gives us a stellar alignment. It talks about the woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, and 12 stars at her head. Well, you can go to stellarium.org and download the free software called Stellarium and use it to see the tracking of the sun, moon, and stars and planets at any time in history or currently or in the future. So I went back, based on some research that I had been aware of, to September 11th, 3 BC, which the software reckons as -2 on the Gregorian calendar. So when you go to September 11th, -2 in the software, 3 BC, you see the exact alignment of Revelation chapter 12. And it only happened, the only time in recorded human history that this alignment happened is in an 80-minute window of time. So apparently I believe Mary's labor pains lasted probably 80 minutes because that was the sign of his birth on September 11th, 3 BC. And I'm like, well, of course, that makes perfect sense why the devil would use that date to completely mock and corrupt through a lie. I believe 9/11 is absolutely an inside job created by Luciferians from our own government to defame the birth of our Savior. Meanwhile, the birth of their Savior, who is Nimrod, the Antichrist, the beast, is what everybody celebrates and sings, "It's the most wonderful time of the year" on December 25th. And I'm like, can you imagine people singing "It's the most wonderful time of the year" on September 11th? Not in this country, because it's been made a day of infamy, a horrible day for us.
Right.
But that was just all part of the Luciferian plan, and it's part of what I see in the Omega plan that I lay out. Now, with that in mind, if our calendars are actually off by 2 years, which the software seems to indicate that it is, if that was the birth date of our Savior, and we now say BCE and stuff like that, or Common Era. That's because they don't want to acknowledge Jesus. It used to be AD and BC, before Christ and Anno Domini. So we reckon our current time from that period when Jesus was born, whether you use BCE or CE or not. That's just a fact. So if our calendar is off by 2 years, then if you look at what happened on December 21st, 2010, some very interesting things happened. And I happened to be out with my wife. Sheila and I were walking. We were late night people, so we were out at 2 a.m. walking around and going for our kind of nightly walk that we used to do. And I look up, and the moon is floating over the shoulders of Orion, who is the mighty hunter. Nimrod was the mighty hunter of Scripture. Right. They're one and the same. You see the moon floating over the shoulders of Orion, and it starts turning blood red. So it looks like a decapitated head floating over the shoulders of Orion for 72 minutes, which I'm sure, as you know, is one of those high occult numbers like 33 and 13. I mean, just do a Google on 72, and you're going to be busy forever. 72 goetic demons that you talked about on my show the other day, It's all over the place. So I'm watching this, and I'm going, this is huge. This is something, I don't know what this is, but this is huge. So I'm like, we got to get home. So I got home, and I instantly had like 50 browser windows open on my monitors at one time because I'm like Googling everything, And I came across, while I was doing that, several others were as well, like Dutch Sense. You know Dutch on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
He's real big on HARP and earthquakes and stuff, and so he posts some pretty cool stuff. Well, he was live, freaking out just like I was on YouTube, and he was recording a video live of the internet seismic servers that check earthquake activity around the world, and literally all of them are going in the black. Like,
right.
and he's freaking out. I'm freaking out. I'm watching him freak out. And he's like, he's like, I don't know what's going on, but something's happening here. The whole world's shaking, and it's happening while the blood red moon, decapitated head of Orion, is floating over his shoulders. Simultaneously, while this is happening in the United States at night, at 2:22 in the morning Central Standard Time, it occurred to me, wait a minute, Washington, D.C. is Eastern. That's 3:22 Eastern Time. And all of a sudden, the Skull and Bones logo flashes in my head with the skull on a pile of bones with the number 322 on it. And I'm going, oh, boy, something's going on right here. Probably they're having the Skull and Bones heyday party right now, because at that same moment here, while it's nighttime here, it was daytime in Iraq, Nimrod's hometown. They were announcing that they had just formed, their fully formed government is now intact. So it's like Nimrod's hometown saying, we're back in business, and our government that made that possible is going, 322, the skulls over the bones, woo-hoo! And all the signs are there. And it was almost immediately after that we had reports of hundreds of thousands of birds falling from the sky, millions of fish beaching themselves, and everybody's going, this is mass die-off, what's going on here? And then the astrologers announced that they had just added the 13th sign to the zodiac, which was Ophiuchus, the serpent handler. And Ophiuchus in the Greek mythology is Asclepius, and Asclepius was known for emptying Hades, the domain of the dead, the underworld, and he was also known for resurrecting Orion. So as I'm watching this happen, all of this in front of my face, I'm going, this is the event that the Mayans saw when they put together the Aztec calendar stone. And the only reason it went under the radar is because our calendars are off by 2 years. It happened on December 21st, 2010, when all of this started. 2012, nothing happened, and I'm like, well, if all of these same events would have happened in 2012, man, everybody and their dog would have been writing about it and talking about it. But it went completely under the radar because it happened 2 years earlier. And the reason it happened 2 years earlier is because we've got the date of Jesus' birth wrong, not only in December, but also the year. So, and I believe that was that the day Nimrod was resurrected? I don't know. I have no idea. Was there occult rituals taking place at Giza? I have no idea. Or elsewhere? Was something being cloned in a lab, or was an individual, like Obama, going through a ritual to be possessed? I have no idea. But like I said, and we talked about this, you were talking about this on the show and in your video, Aliens from Hell, the fact of Obama's likeness to Akhenaten, and they say King Tut, and the fact that the scientists of the world are trying to clone the pharaohs. And they're telling you this, we're going to start working on cloning the pharaohs. Why? Because I think they're trying to do something here, and probably practicing on the lesser pharaohs before they try it on the big one, Osiris. Because if they can get it right with the Akhenatens of the world, then they'll get it right with Osiris. And I'm saying, well, maybe the other pharaohs that they resurrect, could these be some of the kings, like 10 kings that were given power for a short period of time in the book of Revelation? Could these be some of the people whose names were not written in the book of life that were never meant to be walking this earth again? I don't know. I'm just a researcher looking at the evidence saying this is stuff that we should be paying attention to. And the whole idea that he could be cloned is certainly plausible. And the idea that Obama's got this big scar on the back of his head, maybe he had a skull reduction surgery when he was a baby. I don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, was he previously a conehead? I don't know, but everybody says he's the likeness of King Tut and Akhenaten, who were coneheads. So I don't know, man, but we live in some interesting times for sure.
Well, it's certainly never been a time where all of these things are possible. Chimeras, cloning, opening pits of hell,
right?
Even transmitting into the other dimension, as I was saying. All of these things are now possible, and we have never been so close to what I would even consider the end of the world. And I know that we don't have enough time for you to fully expound the concepts that you have in your videos on the timeline of the end of days. But I know that you did do serious work in the astrological and the connecting them with these prophecies. And so do you want to just kind of give us a quick synopsis?
I'll give you a real quick one. I believe that we have at least 19 more years left And the reason I say that is because, I don't know how much you've gotten into this, but there's a lot of people in the circles that I run with that are talking about the blood red moons, the tetrads they call them, that are happening on Yahweh's feast days, the Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. These are the feasts of Leviticus 23, and there are blood moons that are happening on these feasts. So Pastor Mark Biltz was, I think, the first person to really point this out in 2008, and it's really gotten the attention of a lot of people, secular and otherwise. They're looking at this stuff going, are these harbingers of end times? I mean, they appear to be. Now, prior to us entering 2014 and 15, there were other people looking at this saying, 2014 and 15 could be the beginning of the end. I was looking at it saying, no, I don't think so. Because I'm looking at things like the 2045 Strategic Social Initiative. People can go to 2045.com and look at what the scientists of the world are saying they're trying to do. They're basically saying we will achieve immortality, I would say parenthetically, apart from God, by 2045. And front page covers of Time magazine are showing this with a dude with a plug in the back of his head. It says 2045, the year man becomes immortal, So this is what they're trying to do, and they're trying to do it through transhumanism. And if you read the stuff of Nick Bostrom and lots of others talking about blending ourselves with animals, and Michio Kaku talking about blending ourselves with machines and creating the Borg and uploading our consciousness to the hive mind and transcendency, and the movie with Johnny Depp showing Ray Kurzweil's dream of singularity. Right. These are all things that are happening today. They have a timeline that they are following with a goal of 2045. So I can't see past 2045 in any way. I look at all that, and I mean, you're in Blade Runner, you're in Terminator, you're in Skynet. I mean, all of that stuff, if they achieve their goals, that's where we're going to be in the next 30 years or so. And so I think that's why Jesus says, except those days be shortened, no flesh would be saved. That's where I believe we're headed. But I looked at the timeline of the tetrads, and there's another one happening in 2033 and 34, which is a lot closer to where my research has led me to thinking is the end. So there's also what's known as the time of Jacob's trouble. Many people in eschatological circles will say that that's a 7-year tribulation period or a 3.5-year time of great tribulation. I believe that that is true, but I believe that's included in a time period known as the time of Jacob's trouble. Well, Isaiah 46:10 says God declares the end from the beginning. So if I want to understand Revelation, let's go back to Genesis. Well, if I go back to Genesis to find a time when Jacob had trouble, it's in Genesis chapter 31, where he says in multiple times, he says that his affliction lasted 20 years. And this is when he cheated Esau, his brother, had to go off into hiding at Uncle Laban's house. He met Rachel. He said, she's hot. I want her for a wife. Laban says, sure, you got to work 7 years for me. Okay, he worked 7 years for Rachel, but come to find out, Rachel's not the firstborn, so he ends up with Leah. He's like, hey, what's the deal? He's like, well, we always do the firstborn first. If you want Rachel, you got to work another 7 years. So he works another 7 years, for Rachel. Then he's got his whole family together for 6 years of wealth building. The whole time Uncle Laban's cheating him and messing with him, jacking, with his family. So he says at least twice that his time of affliction was 20 years. So with that in mind, I thought, well, the time of Jacob's trouble then is 20 years, according to Genesis, declaring the end from the beginning. Well, if you look at 322:13, there's some big numbers there. March 22nd of last year, and just do a Google on that. Part of the Omega plan is showing that's when the Georgia Guidestones show up, 322. Right? The shock and awe campaign in Iraq, 322. This March 22nd thing kept showing up. And, of course, 13 being the big Osiris occult number. There was a lot of interesting things, including Obama being in the Holy Land, walking around Jerusalem on 322:13 last year. I speculate, and I acknowledge that this is pure speculation, but I believe the time of Jacob's trouble, 20-year time period, may have started on 322:13. This is why I say I believe we have 19 more years left, because we're a year past that. And that takes you out to 2033 and the 34 time frame, which is closer to the transhumanist timeline and the Ray Kurzweils of the world. So
that would also bring you to the return of Apophis.
Really? There's a prophecy or something about him in 2033-ish?
No, Apophis the asteroid is
Oh,
returning 2029 and then 2036, and it's believed that it's entirely possible that Apophis could strike the Earth in 2036.
well, I mean, it all fits perfectly, especially if you look in the apocalyptic literature of like Revelation, where it talks about wormwood and these massive comets and things hitting the Earth, fiery meteors and stuff. And then, of course, in 2016, this is something I forgot to mention earlier, you have the OSIRIS-REx probe
Oh yeah.
that I mean, it's like King Osiris-Rex. Is going to go to the Bennu asteroid. You're like,
Right,
what,
right. I
seriously?
mean, come on.
I mean, come on, seriously. King Osiris is going to the Bennu asteroid to collect DNA samples that they hope to return to Earth by 2023. Okay.
And if people remember that the Bennu bird is the Egyptian phoenix, the sign of resurrection, and also the bird of Osiris, and
Right.
has been mentioned by Rob earlier in the show.
So you're like, seriously? A probe named the King Osiris is going to the Bennu to get DNA samples to return to Earth by 2023? I'm like, you can't script this stuff, man. I mean,
You really can't.
this
You
is
really
crazy.
can't.
These guys are doing this stuff on a regular basis. So the writing's on the wall, as I see it, anyway.
All right. Well, it has been an amazing show here with you, Rob. I've learned a lot from your talks, and I'm blown away at our joined forces, and I can't wait to really work with you some, maybe share more ideas together at least, and maybe even become a writer for your seed production. So
Yeah,
you
man.
want to tell us the concept behind seed, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, right on, man. I definitely want to talk to you about collaboration in that regard. Seed, I realize, I mean, you may have seen the same thing in your circles. I mean, you do secular conferences and stuff, and I do more, I have in the past done more Christian-oriented conferences, but we don't have that many people, man. I mean, you might get an average of 50 to 80 people show up, maybe 100. Some cases we've seen 1,000 or 2,000, but rarely have I ever seen, even with the big names, with the Chuck Misslers and the Tom Horns and stuff there. I mean, you still end up with 300 or maybe 1,000 people there.
Sure.
There's 300 million people in the country and 7 billion on the planet, and very few of those people have a clue about anything you and I are talking about. But the Nielsen report says the average American watches 4 to 5 hours worth of TV a day. And I found as a missionary, I traveled to over a dozen countries as a missionary, that I could go anywhere. I've been in the jungles of northeast India, and I could say through interpreters, hey, do you know, where does the phrase, may the force be with you, come from? They all know it. I mean,
That is scary.
Everywhere I've been, they know it. You know, we had some fun talks about George Lucas the other day,
Yeah.
too. I mean, what did he know? But that shows you the power of American media. I mean, it has shaped the culture, not just of our country, but of the world. And so with that in mind, I'm going, well, what if I create a science fiction series that will be called Seed, because I'm just going to plant seeds of all the stuff that you and I are talking about. I mean, others have done it. Stargate's a perfect example, where they are regularly planting seeds in shows like Stargate and others about what they believe, their worldview, and point blank, their occult ritualistic practices are put right there on the screen for you.
No doubt.
So I'm like, well, if Satan can utilize that mode of entertainment to literally influence the world, why can't I? Especially from my worldview, with the power of the Holy Spirit working in me to tell the truth. So I got a outline downloaded, I like to say, into my head. Basically, I think God plugged a USB cable in my head and downloaded 72 episodes. And again, I'm utilizing the numbers, you know, because so I've got 72 episodes, 6 seasons, 12 episodes per season outlined, 3 completed scripts, and a partially completed 4th one. But I've stopped writing there because I want to collaborate. I want other people, other writers who understand the material to collaborate with me creatively to create science fiction that can get the truth of what you and I try to get out through lectures and books to the very few who will listen, out to the masses. And the thing about science fiction is people go into it suspending their disbelief. That's the beauty of it. So if you've already turned off your belief filter, well, that means you're open to believing whatever they want to tell you on Battlestar Galactica about the mythology of the Mormons. I mean, the whole series is about Mormonism, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, I just want to do what they've done, but do it from the perspective that I've been led to understand.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I look forward to that, and I hope that I can join in on your writing crew. I think that'd be amazing. And you know, in the same way, I really just want us to be able to start to reach a larger audience, be able to start to really, you know, cause some change in this world, because we're closer to the end than any generation has ever been. If anything be true, that is true, and it's time for us to make the big shift, and it's time for you guys, the listeners, to really take this to heart, to really start to understand that there are some serious dangers. And it's not these dangers that are off somewhere in the distance. It's not the you know, it's not the wars that you can't affect. It's not things that are going on outside of your own realm. It's right here in front of you every moment of every day, as Rob discusses with the holidays, Christmas, Easter. You don't even know. But then look at the power of what has happened in his stories with the ideas of being able to crush Canaanite temples and altars, utilizing nothing but your spirit. We have that within us. And it's just a matter of us starting to break away from the mind control programming and attempt to start to change the world. I mean, that's what we came here to do. So let's go ahead and be bold and start to change the world as we know it. Rob, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the Free Zone. I'm sure we'll have more and more adventures together here very soon.
Right on. Thank you so much, Freeman. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in and dealing with our technical difficulties. Someday we'll get this all to work out right. And I'm so glad that all of you have come back to freemantv.com and are there hanging out in the chat room with everyone. Sorry I didn't get much chance to join you there tonight because, well, this was just too darn intriguing to pass up. So we will see you all again next week, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, here on freemantv.com. This is the Free Zone, signing out.
Monster, and it will destroy you. Patience. You have created a monster, and it will destroy you. Patience, patience. I believe in this monster, as you call it. If you don't, well, you must leave me alone. Stimulate you, won't you come and stimulate me? I want to stimulate you, won't you come and stimulate me? Barack Obama's going to stimulate everybody in this socialist democracy. Let me tell you how it got to this. This defunct economic stimulus. Listen to Luciferian hypnotists, psychotic hypocrites. Yeah, gonna tell you how it came to this. Listen to power-hungry illuminists. We came in like a lion, now we out like a lamb. The gold of Mendes is Uncle Sam. Stimulate you, won't you come and stimulate me? And then the congregation stood up, because the future, it looks so bright. And by the time the children reached puberty, they had lost all their rights. Let me tell you how it got to this. How our country became so socialist. Listen to reptiles and troglodytes, elected pedophiles and sodomites. I'm gonna tell you how it came to this. Listening to puppets with their ventriloquists. Modern day communists hanging out with New Age scientists. Yeah. Pass away, and now communism's here to stay. To stay. To stay. Pass away, and now communism's here to stay. Saw the republic pass away, and now communism's here to stay. Saw the republic pass away, and now communism's here to stay. Better take a stand today, or else the devil's gonna have his way.